Arizona Territory. 1879, the sun burned hard over the red sand when Zadie Sutton refused to move. She stood in front of the last 3 head of cattle left on her family's land, hands bloodied from the fight, face streaked with sweat and dust. The rancher, Elias McGraw, sat high on his black gelding, chewing a matchstick while his men dismounted. "You had your warning," Elias said, voice low, dangerous. "You trespass on my claim again, you pay for it." "This land was my father's," Zadie said, not flinching. "You bought it after he died, but you will not take the cattle too." Elias gave the nod. 2 of his ranch hands grabbed her, one twisted her arm behind her back, the other yanked her forward. She kicked, cursed, fought every inch of the way, but they dragged her to the split-rail fence that once marked the edge of her father's homestead, now part of McGraw's sprawling empire. They chained her there, thick iron around her wrists, locked to the fence post. "Let her sit in the sun for a while," Elias said, turning his horse. "Maybe she will remember what rules taste like." The men laughed as they rode off, cattle in tow. Zadie stayed silent. The chains bit into her skin. Her mouth was dry. Her pride hurt worse. The wind blew hot and slow across the plain. Hours passed. Then hooves again. She raised her head. A lone rider approached from the west. Dust trailed behind his horse like a comet tail, sun at his back. He slowed as he neared, reining in a tall bay stallion. He was no ranch hand, no hired gun. He wore a trail-worn coat, dust on his boots, and a look in his eyes like he had seen too much and held it all in. He dismounted slowly, gaze fixed on her. "Lord," he muttered. "What the hell happened to you?" She swallowed, voice hoarse. "McGraw said I trespassed, took the cattle, left me here." He stepped closer, hands loose at his sides. "He chained you," Zadie nodded. The man looked at the lock, then at her wrists already bleeding. "Cut her loose," he said quietly, like it was not a request. She blinked. "You got a name?" "Wesley Shaw," he said, pulling a knife from his belt and slipping it into the lock's clasp. It cracked open with a snap. Zadie sagged to her knees, groaning as circulation returned to her arms. Wesley knelt beside her, catching her before she fell forward. "Easy," he said. "I got you." She looked up at him, eyes fierce even through the pain. "Why would you help me?" He did not answer right away. He took a flask from his coat, held it to her lips. "Because no man who chains a woman to a fence over land and cattle deserves to own either." She drank. The water scorched her dry throat, but she did not stop. When he helped her to her feet, she leaned on him. He let her. "Where is your horse?" he asked. McGraw's men ran him off. Wesley nodded once. "Then you ride with me." She hesitated. "There is no shame in needing help, Miss Sutton." She looked at him, then really looked, and saw a man who did not pity her. Just a man who had decided, plain and simple, that this was not something he would walk past. "Zadie," she said softly. "My name is Zadie." He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her, arms steady around her waist. The ride was slow. Her body ached, but she did not complain. They headed west toward the mesa where the land rose in golden folds. He said little. She said less. They reached a small cabin at dusk, just one room, a porch, and a lean-to for the horse. "You live here?" she asked. "For now." He helped her down, led her inside. Clean, simple, a cot, table, stove, a rifle above the door. As the sun dipped low, he built a fire in the stove and warmed beans, tore bread into pieces, and put a tin plate in front of her. She ate in silence, eyes flicking to him more than once. He watched her hands, how they trembled still, how she curled her fingers to hide it. "You should rest," he said. "You are safe here." Zadie stared at the fire. "I do not know what safe is any more." He sat across from her, elbows on his knees. "McGraw has a long reach. I have a longer memory." She looked at him. "You know him. We crossed once." "He took something from someone I cared for." His voice went rough. "I never paid him back. Maybe this is a start." Zadie folded her arms. "He will come after me. He will send men." "I hope he does," Wesley said, calm and sure. "I have never been good at running." She studied him, then the way he sat like a loaded spring, the way his jaw set when he talked about McGraw. There was more to him, pain like hers, not the same but close enough to recognize. "Why are you out here alone?" she asked. He looked at the fire too long. "Some men lose everything and go looking for peace. I was never good at peace, either." She nodded once. "I lost everything too, but I did not go looking for peace. I went looking for a fight." He smiled soft and quiet. "I reckon you found one." Zadie leaned back, eyes burning from more than just the firelight. "I will not run from McGraw," she said. "I am not asking you to." They sat in the growing dark, the silence not empty but full of something unnamed. Zadie's eyes began to close, heavy with exhaustion. Wesley stood, grabbed a blanket and laid it over her shoulders. "You sleep," he said. "I will watch the door." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you." He paused, looked down at her. "You should never have been chained." She met his gaze. "You are the first man who said that like he meant it." And then sleep took her, curled up by the fire, her heart still bruised but not alone anymore. Wesley sat by the door, rifle across his lap, eyes on the dark outside. He had not come looking for her. But now that she was here, he would not let her fall again. Not while he still breathed. Zadie woke to the scent of juniper smoke and the soft scrape of steel on stone. Her wrists throbbed, but someone had wrapped them in cotton and tied it snug, not too tight. She sat up slowly, the blanket slipping off her shoulders. Wesley knelt near the hearth, sharpening his knife. His coat hung on a peg, revealing a shirt dark with sweat and trail wear. He didn't look up when she stirred. "You grind your blade like that every morning?" she asked, voice rough with sleep. "Only if I plan to use it." She eased herself off the cot, testing her legs. "You expect trouble. Trouble doesn't care if you expect it. It comes anyway." He glanced at her then, just once. "You're walking better." "I've hurt worse." She moved to the basin by the door, poured water from the jug and splashed her face. "Ain't nothing broken." He stood, slid the knife into its sheath. "That's luck." McGraw's men don't usually leave things half-finished. Zadie dried her face on the hem of her shirt. "They didn't think I was worth the bullet. Figured the sun would do the work for them." Wesley poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handed her one. "That kind of thinking's what makes men careless. Gives you the edge." She held the cup in both hands, let the heat settle into her fingers. "You always talk like you're sizing up a fight." He didn't smile, but something in his eyes lightened. "Not always." They drank in silence. Outside, the wind shifted, bringing the distant sound of a hawk cry and the rustle of dry grass. The land felt stretched thin, like it was waiting. Zadie set her cup down. "I need to get back." "No," her breath caught. "It's my land. It's McGraw's now." She stepped closer, chin lifted. "You think I don't know that? I think you're still bleeding and not ready for another beating." She didn't flinch, but her voice lowered. "I've been not ready since the day I buried my father. Didn't stop me then." Wesley leaned against the table, arms folded. "You got a plan. I'll take what's mine back, one way or another." "That's not a plan. That's a grave waiting to be dug." She stared at him, jaw clenched. "You afraid I'll get myself killed?" "I'm afraid I'll have to watch it happen." The air between them shifted, not soft, not tender. Just still. Zadie turned away, moved to the window. The mesa stood in the distance, gold and rust under the sky. "There's a spring up past the ridge. My father built a line from it to our house. If McGraw hasn't torn it out, it's still supplying water." Wesley rubbed a hand along his jaw. "That spring's outside his deed. If it's still flowing, it's leverage." She nodded. "He can't claim the land without controlling the water. You know how to reach it without being seen." There's a gulch west of the fence line. Dry this time of year. Run straight to the rise. He considered her a moment. We'll go tonight after dark, she turned. You got grit, but grit doesn't stop bullets. I don't need a guard. I'm not offering to guard you, I'm offering to walk beside you. She was quiet a beat too long. Then, you always this stubborn, he picked up his hat. Only when I get the feeling it matters. She went outside, boots crunching dry soil. The horse stood tethered in the lean-to, tail flicking. She ran a hand along its flank, slow and steady. Wesley joined her, checked the cinch and filled the canteens. You ride well, he asked. Well enough. Tonight you'll need to ride quiet, not just well. She met his gaze. I can do quiet, he nodded once. Then we'll see what McGraw's left behind. Zadie brushed dust from her sleeve. He's a man who thinks the world's his because no one stopped him. Then maybe it's time someone did. She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. The sun climbed higher. They packed light, left the fire to die on its own. The day passed slow, the hours marked by small tasks and long silences. Zadie mended a tear in her shirt with thread and needle from a tin box on the table. Wesley cleaned the rifle, checked the cartridges. When dusk came, they didn't speak. Just mounted up and turned west, the sky bleeding orange behind them. The land cooled as they rode. Coyotes called in the distance, and the stars blinked out one by one. Zadie led him to the gulch. They moved single file, the horses' hooves muffled by sand and stone. Near midnight they dismounted and climbed the slope on foot. The spring pool shimmered faintly in the moonlight, still fed by the narrow pipe running toward the homestead. Zadie knelt, pressed her palm to the pipe. Still flowing. Wesley crouched beside her. Then he hasn't noticed it yet. Or he doesn't know it matters. It will. They sat in the hush of the desert, backs against the rock, the pipe between them. Zadie whispered, You could walk away from this. So could you? I already tried that. Didn't take. He looked at her then, the moonlight catching the edge of her profile. I've seen men break for less than what you've carried. She didn't answer, just reached for her canteen and took a slow drink. I wanted to disappear, he said after a while. That's why I came out here. Thought if I stayed far enough from people, I wouldn't have to feel anything anymore. She turned toward him. And now, I found you. She didn't speak, but she didn't turn away either. Wind moved across the ridge, soft and dry. Wesley reached for her hand, not sudden, not demanding, just there. She let him. Their fingers stayed laced as they watched the dark together. Nothing hurried, nothing spoken. They didn't need words for what had already begun. The trail back from the spring cut lower into the gulch than before. Wesley led the way this time, his hand steady on the reins, the rifle slung across his back shifting with each step. Zadie stayed close, her boots quiet over the loose shale. The moon had dipped behind the ridge, leaving the world in a silver hush. They didn't speak until the cabin came into view, its outline faint against the pale sky. Zadie paused just beyond the lean-to and listened. No hoofbeats, no voices, just the soft creak of the wind against the eaves. Wesley stepped onto the porch first. Wait here, he said, his voice low. She watched him disappear inside. A moment later, a lamp flickered behind the window. Then the door opened again. It's clear. Inside, the air was warm from the fire he'd rekindled. She unwrapped her scarf and hung it by the door, her shoulders aching from the climb. Wesley was already pouring water into the kettle, setting it on the stove without a word. His movements were practiced, but slower than before. Zadie noticed the way he pressed a hand to his side when he thought she wasn't looking. You're hit, she said. He kept his back to her. Grazed. Back near the ridge, might have caught a thorn. Let me see. I've had worse. I didn't ask. He turned after a pause, pulling his shirt loose from where it clung. A shallow cut ran just under his ribs, red and raw. Zadie crossed the room, opened the wooden crate near the cot, and came back with a strip of clean cotton and a small jar of lard. "Sit down." Wesley obeyed without protest. She knelt, tore the cloth into a narrow band, and dabbed the wound with a corner of it. "You've bled through your shirt. I noticed." She glanced up. "I thought you said it was just a thorn." He winced as she pressed the poultice in place. "Didn't say what kind." Zadie tied the bandage tight, then sat back on her heels. "Next time you tell me." "I will," he said. "If there is one." They held each other's gaze longer than they meant to. Then she stood and moved to the table, the tension still warm in her chest. "McGraw won't leave that water line be," she said. "Soon as he figures what it's worth, he'll send someone to dig it up." "I know. Then we need to get ahead of him." Wesley leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "We do that by making it a matter of law. That spring's outside the deed, and the homestead was never formally transferred." "McGraw's got the cattle, but not the title." Zadie frowned. "Law doesn't stop men like him, not out here. Maybe not, but it slows them down." She crossed her arms. "What slows him down faster is proof." Wesley looked up. "What kind of proof?" "My father kept papers. Deed, water rights, even the original land grant. If they're still in the house, we can use them." McGraw would have searched the place. "He didn't know where to look." Her voice was steady. "I did." Wesley didn't answer right away. He stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the dark. Then he turned. "When?" "Tomorrow night. We'll go in through the creek bed. The back window's still boarded, but I can open it from the inside." He nodded once. "Then we'll ride at dusk." Zadie moved to the cot, not to sleep, but to sit. Her hands were folded in her lap, the bandages faintly pink where the scabs had reopened during the climb. She didn't complain. Wesley sat across from her again, closer this time. "You said your father kept everything," he said. "Did he know this might happen?" He knew McGraw. Knew what kind of man he was, but he still believed land could be held by honesty. "And you?" "I believe land's only yours if you're willing to bleed for it." He nodded, slow. The kettle began to hiss. Wesley stood and poured the water over the coffee grounds, steam rising between them. He handed her a cup without a word. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked. "Going somewhere no one wants your land or your blood?" "I tried once," he said. "Kansas. Thought I could make a life out there, bought a plow, broke ground. Then the rain stopped and the bank came. Took back the land, the plow, and the rest of me." Zadie looked down at her cup. "So you came here." "I came west because there was nothing left east." She considered that. "I stayed because I couldn't bury another place." Wesley looked at her, really looked. The shadows softened around her face, drawing every line earned by grief, defiance, and dust. "You're not alone now," he said. She didn't answer right away, then she lifted her eyes. "Neither are you." They didn't touch, not yet. But something passed between them, all the same, something deeper than words or borrowed warmth. Outside, the wind shifted again, cooler now. The desert was quiet, but it didn't feel empty. Tomorrow they'd ride again. Tomorrow they'd step back into danger. But tonight they were here. Together. And for the first time in too long, neither one of them had to hold the weight alone. The moon was long gone by the time they bedded the horses in silence. Zadie didn't speak as she set her rifle by the door, nor did Wesley offer anything as he stoked the stove back to life. The quiet between them had changed, less guarded, more certain. Not safe, but steadier. Zadie sat at the table, her shirt damp with sweat from the climb, her knuckles raw where the rains had rubbed skin thin. "McGraw keeps a man named Conroy close," she said without preamble. "Used to run freight from Prescott to Flagstaff, until he shot a deputy who caught him skimming off the ledgers." Wesley poured a measure of whiskey into 2 cups, passing one to her. "He's the one with the scar down his neck. Rides a gray gelding." She nodded. "He knows the house better than McGraw. He was there the night my father died." Wesley leaned against the wall, sipping slow. "You think he'll be there again?" "Not think. No." She traced the rim of her cup with a fingertip. "He's the kind who doesn't leave things half-finished. You planning to kill him?" She didn't answer right away. "I'm planning to finish what he started." Wesley set his drink down. "You do that, even with proof in hand, and the law won't be on your side." "I'm not asking it to be." He crossed to her, pulled a chair out with the toe of his boot, and sat. "You kill a man like Conroy, McGraw makes sure every badge from here to Santa Cruz comes looking for you. I'm not afraid of them. I know." He rested his arms on the table. "But I am." Zadie looked at him, her mouth parting slightly. "For you," he added, his voice low. She didn't flinch. "I'm not used to someone saying that and meaning it." "I don't say things I don't mean." She studied him in silence, the lines around his eyes deeper than they'd seemed in daylight. He looked tired but not worn through. "Not yet." "I won't die in that house," she said. "Not with my father's name dust on someone else's boots." "Then we do this smart. We find the papers. We ride straight to the deputy land agent in Canyon Station. I know him. He's slow, but he's honest." Zadie glanced toward the shuttered window. "And if we don't make it that far?" "Then we make it farther," he said simply. She exhaled, long and quiet. "You always been like this." "Like what?" "Stubborn, steady, like a fence post that won't rot." He gave half a shrug. "Lost too many people by moving too fast. Learned to plant my feet." She ran a thumb along the edge of her cup. "I've never had anyone stay." Wesley didn't reach for her, didn't push. He just sat across from her, gaze steady. "I'm here now." A log shifted in the stove, sending a soft flare of light across the floor. Zadie rose and walked to the cot, but she didn't lie down. She stood a moment, then looked back at him. "You ever miss the place you left behind?" "No," he said without hesitation. "But I remember it. Every night." She nodded, as if she understood more than he'd spoken. "I remember mine, too. The smell of the porch wood after rain. The way my father folded his hat like it was something sacred." "You built a life," he said gently. "That matters." She looked down at her hands. "I want it back." He stood then, slowly, like he didn't want to startle a single breath in the room. "Then we'll take it." Zadie didn't speak again. Instead, she sat on the edge of the cot, untied her boots, and laid back with her face turned toward the firelight. Wesley watched her a moment, then moved to the door and cracked it just enough to look out. The stars were still out in full. The land was holding its breath. He closed the door, bolted it, and crossed the room. He pulled the extra blanket from the shelf and lay it across the floorboards. "You don't have to sleep down there," she said quietly. "I know." She didn't say more, and he didn't push it. But when he lay down, he did not sleep. Neither did she. The wind moaned low outside, carrying with it the weight of what dawn would bring. But in that room, nothing moved except the slow rhythm of two people learning without speaking, without touching what it felt like to be kept. Not claimed. Not owned. Just kept. Safe, for now, together. By the time the sun reached its peak the next day, they'd already covered 20 miles. Zadie rode ahead, guiding them through dry canyon passes and over rocky swells that hadn't seen a wagon in years. The air was sharp with creosote and heat, and the only sound was the steady rhythm of hooves over stone. Neither of them had spoken since dawn. They stopped at a narrow draw where cottonwoods clung to the edges of a shallow stream. Wesley dismounted and led his horse to water, his shirt clinging at the back where the bandage pressed through. Zadie crouched by the bank, splashing her face, then filled both canteens. "You always ride quiet like that?" she asked without looking up. "Only when I'm thinking." She capped the canteens and stood. "What about Conroy? He's not the kind who stays still. If he's guarding the house, he'll be watching both the front and the mule trail behind it." "There's a root cellar out back," Zadie said. The trapdoor's under the porch, near the wash basin. If we crawl in through there, we'll come up under the kitchen. Wesley's brow furrowed. You sure it's not sealed? My father built it to last through a siege. Hinges are iron and the bolts are inside. Wesley tied off the reins. We'll wait till second dusk. That's when the wind kicks up, makes it harder to hear footsteps. Zadie walked to where her saddlebag rested against a boulder. She pulled out a parcel wrapped in oilcloth and unrolled it slowly. Inside was a revolver with a mother-of-pearl grip, the barrel worn but the cylinder clean. My father's, she said. He kept it behind the stove, never let me fire it till after he passed. Wesley stepped closer. You shoot with your left. No. But I learned. He watched her check the chambers before sliding it into her belt. You aim to use it, if I have to. They waited until the sky began to dim again, the desert light turning brass and lavender. Then they mounted and rode the last stretch in silence, cutting across the dry basin where the house stood, crouched at the base of a red bluff, its boards weathered, the porch sagging off one side like a broken limb. They tied the horses under a rocky overhang and approached on foot, keeping low to the scrub. The scent of smoke drifted faintly from the chimney. Someone was inside. Zadie led them along the edge of the bluff to the narrow path that circled behind the house. The boards were still there, warped and sun-bleached, but the cellar door was untouched. She knelt and pried it open with a rusted hook hidden beneath a loose stone. The air inside smelled of dry earth and old apples. Wesley followed her down, closing the door behind them. They moved forward, crouched low, until they reached the narrow ladder that led into the kitchen. Zadie climbed first. The kitchen was dark but familiar. She moved without sound, stepping across the worn floorboards to the pantry where the ledger box had once been kept. She reached behind a loose plank and felt the edge of canvas-wrapped paper. Got it, she whispered. Footsteps sounded overhead, slow and deliberate. Wesley eased to the side of the room, rifle raised, back to the stove. The door creaked open. Conroy stepped inside, pistol drawn, eyes sweeping the space. Zadie didn't hesitate. She raised the revolver and fired once. The shot cracked through the room. Conroy staggered, hit the wall, and slid down, his leg bleeding heavy. Get out, Zadie said, voice flat and cold. He looked up, jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. She stepped forward. No, you made it when you came back here. Wesley covered him while she took the pistol from Conroy's hand and tossed it into the hearth. You said you didn't want to kill him, Wesley murmured. I still don't, she said. But I'll see him crawl out of here before I ever let him take what's mine again. They backed out slow, eyes on Conroy, then bolted the door behind them. By the time they reached the horses, the sky had turned full dark and the wind had picked up, carrying dust in thick waves across the flats. They rode through the night, the house shrinking behind them, the papers tied against Wesley's saddle horn. No one followed. By dawn, they reached the canyon station. The land agent, a thin man with ink-stained cuffs and a nervous blink, took the deed and water claim without question. He pressed the necessary seals and handed her back a leather-bound folder, her name written in bold hand across the front. It's yours again, he said. By right and record. Zadie stepped outside, blinking at the sun. Wesley was waiting by the horses, his coat thrown across the saddle, arms folded. She walked up to him, holding the folder tight in both hands. It's done, he nodded, but didn't say anything. She looked up at him. You didn't have to stay after that first night, I know, but you did. I wanted to. She reached for his hand, fingers curling through his. I don't want to go back to that place alone. You won't. They left the town before noon, riding slow this time, no longer pressed by threat or fear. When they reached the homestead again, the light was softer, the wind calmer, and the porch didn't seem so broken anymore. They worked side by side for days replacing boards, clearing the well, planting onions behind the shed where her father had once grown potatoes. Wesley rebuilt the corral, and Zadie painted over the bloodstains on the kitchen floor. On the third evening, she found him on the porch, oiling his rifle in the last of the light. "You staying long?" she asked, leaning against the post. He set the rifle down. "Long as you'll have me." She crossed the space between them, took his face in both hands, and kissed him, slow, certain. As if every moment before had been waiting for this one, he rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd find anything worth staying for." "Neither did I," she whispered. They married that fall quietly, with no guests but the land and the wind and a sky full of stars. She wore her mother's brooch pinned to the collar of her cleanest blouse. He carved a ring from a bone taken from the first deer they hunted together. The cattle never returned, but the land did. They built it back fence by fence, row by row. Years later, when folks passed through and asked what kept them there, Zadie would say it was the water or the soil or the view of the mesa at dawn. But Wesley always knew better. It was her. And she, in turn, would glance at the man beside her, the one who rode into her life without warning, unchained her without asking why, and never once looked back. They grew old there, the two of them, together, still in love, still home.